Welcome, Laura. How are you?
I am great, Seema. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. It's now been, we met like a year ago, just before the world shut down in San Antonio.
Yeah, quite
Um,
literally like a day before.
like a day, like I always say, I came home from that trip and never left home again. Um, and it was such a delight. I like learned your name on a military base, which I like am very rarely introduced to new poets in hospitals. It's usually me introducing poets to hospitals. So that was delightful. And I have been digging into your work and enjoying it. And you've facilitated several workshops for us in the past year. And now you're going to start facilitating more regularly some of our workshops. So it's like super exciting to like grow our connection and be in community with you. So thank you for all of that openness.
Well, I'm the one who feels like the lucky one, the lucky recipient of all of this goodness. And it's very rarely that anyone ever called me from the Army base in regard to poetry. So the fact that I got your email and we met each other and then met each other right in this writers conference, it felt very auspicious and wonderful, and I'm glad it has proven to be so.
Yeah, yeah. The world has all kinds of weird serendipities for us. So you just, Francis of the Wider Field just came out fairly recently. When was that? In April?
Yes, yeah, it's a pandemic book. It came out in March, right in the middle of all this.
And you've done a lot of readings and events.
Yeah, it's a funny thing. I probably have done more readings than I ever could have in the physical world because um, we've all, fortunately, the book came out in 2021 and not 2020 because a year ago, I don't think we were all used to getting on Zoom. Everyone was scrambling to figure it out. So at the time my book came out, people have Zoom fatigue for sure, but also we're accustomed to how this works. So having readings, being able to have people attend these things from all over. My family members were able to come to these and were spread all over the country. So that was nice.
Yeah, there were systems in place, and we sort of um, it's been such a gift to be able to attend readings all over the place, and with writers who I maybe wouldn't have otherwise, like they wouldn't have come to my town necessarily. So
Right,
it's really great.
right.
And can you? So when I think of your work, I'm really, really touched by how you look at these really granular, tiny moments and then expand out and then sink back in. There's some like shape like
Mm.
this of much of your work, and I don't know if that's how you would describe it or how you would see it. And I wondered if you start at the broader, like, oh, I'm writing this poem about grief or about this
Mm.
big topic, and then you work your way back to the little moment, or if it's the little moment opens up.
Hmm. That's a good question, and I don't know that it's a consistent process.
Hmm.
But like you said, grief. So I do have, like, now that I've been writing for some time, I realize that my subjects usually will revolve around some sort of loss, paradox, tension, grief. But I do find a lot in the dailiness. So sometimes I just gather daily things, daily moments, or something that's been bothering me or that I've been thinking about. And sometimes I'll find where these things intersect on the page. Um, but usually, like in the dailiness, it's never really just about the dailiness. It's usually about that dailiness and how it relates to something that, I mean, this is true for so much writing, not just
Right.
what I'm doing. But I don't know that I start with a very particular thing. But it does really mean a lot to me to have kind of poems with a lot of texture.
Mm.
So thinking about the multiplicity of meaning and even more and more the having really disparate things live in the same space to see how they talk to each other, how they interact with each other. And oftentimes that's where poems are springing from, probably even more in this latest book than the others, because so much of Frances of the Wider Field was writing into absence, where, and I've said this a few times, like writing into what I didn't know. So sometimes we start with that old adage, write what you know.
Yeah.
But this project began with writing into what I didn't know, which was, based on some personal narrative of a family member. My mother's mother passed away giving birth to her. And so her absence has been a big presence in our lives.
Yeah, the absence is a presence as a whole. It's a keyhole, right? That you're looking through and trying to figure out what's behind it on the other side.
Right.
Do you have a daily writing practice? Are you taking notes on a daily basis?
I have a pretty daily journaling practice. I've been journaling for decades. I started my freshman year in college, and it hasn't been every single day, but if anything, that's the daily practice. And poems may spring from there when things are going pretty well. And sometimes I have a daily poetry writing practice, part of a group called The Grind, where we really literally grind it out, one poem a day. And I might do that 3 or 4 times a year.
What's the difference between, for somebody who's like not, what's the difference between journaling and poetry writing?
Yeah, that's a good question. A lot of the difference is my own distinction in my head. Part of that is in the morning. So I journal in the morning, always in the morning. If I miss it, then it's done. Tomorrow will come. And in the journal, it can really be like, I ate too much pizza last night and I'm feeling gross.
In there.
Right. It's whatever is happening. I'll always write a date on there. It's usually just me trying to make lists of what I need to do that day. Maybe it will go into some thought. I try to stick with it long enough that I write 3 pages, but usually it's really 1 or 2. But the daily grind of poets, it's more intentional. It's like I'm really trying to write drafts of things that will turn into revised work.
And do you come to those when you're doing the daily grind? Do you have like some ideas of what you're going to write before you get to the page, or do you sit at the page and are like, like sweating?
Usually I sit at the page and go, oh man, it's almost, like I have to get this done today. And so I don't often have, I'll use my journal when I'm doing the grind. I'll use it to try to find some things in the morning and think about them through the day, and then try to write a draft of something. So it's a little bit more symbiotic process between those 2 forms when I'm doing that. But sometimes, I'll be honest, it's just garbage. They're just like garbagey things that I'm trying to write down. And a month or 2 later, I'll look at those files and say, oh my gosh, who wrote this? I don't remember writing any of this.
Yeah. And does it change from being like, as you said, garbagey? Do you then, with some space, look at it and you're like, oh, this isn't so bad?
Occasionally. Once in a while, I'm really surprised pleasantly, but sometimes I really open it and say, what? Oh man, I was desperate.
Yeah. These are files someone should delete if I die. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. Or I'm doing the same thing every day and it's always about the weather. Or just like what I'm looking at out my window, which is usually nothing really exciting.
Do you date the poem drafts as well?
I have a folder on my desktop that's like poems by month or something. And then I'll title it, May of 2021, and then just have day 1. And whatever the first line is usually becomes the title, because that's as far as I can get. So I do have them pretty, like I can look back. I think that first grind may have been in 2010 or 2011.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, but so some of those are so bad back there.
Is it the same group of people? Where?
So it's a group where you can sign up and then they just kind of put you in. So sometimes you're with a bunch of people you don't know and there's no commenting. It's just accountability.
Ah, oh, that's great.
Right. Just pretty much meet this deadline and check, send it. So you have to send it in by midnight of whichever time zone you're in because there's people writing from all over the world. And
Oh, cool.
uh,
And before that, before you started that process, did you have that same, like, how did that change when you're working on a book, for example? How did that?
mm,
Yeah.
um, well, it changed so that Frances' book was born out of the grind, actually. There was a magical little time span in this, it was about 2014 that those first poems emerged and this character of Frances started emerging. And because I was writing daily, it became kind of a whole month of this exploration of what's Frances, what's happening, what is this? So, maybe only a couple of those actually survived, but some of the key poems of the book came out of that process. And I do think that there's something to the fact of when you get onto an idea, when it gets hot that way, and you are forcing yourself to return every single day, you don't get too worked up about what's not working. It's like I said, it was kind of magical, and that's rare. That's happened maybe once or twice.
Yeah, it takes a sort of pressure of production off, and it's really the sort of like returns to curiosity. It sounds like,
Definitely. Yeah.
um, which is
I would like to recapture that. Let's make that happen again.
well, what do you do to capture when it's time? I know it's like that kind of magic sometimes. I think maybe it was Dare Williams who described it as like when a spotlight goes on over your page and you're just like, oh, here it is, right? Like those rare, rare moments of art making that come that way. Um, but do you have rituals that you kind of like enact in order to get yourself into when you need to write, when you need to sort of like, okay, now this is a book and I have to write, 40 poems. Is there
Right.
something you do?
Well, I'm a slow writer, so I don't think I've ever sat down and said, now I need to write 40 poems. So it's, my books have been compiled over long spans of time, like 7 years. I may write and the poems accumulate and then I see what do I have and piece it all together. However, there are times that, I have to do work. I have to do various kinds of writing with various things I'm in. But one thing I will say is for the last year and a half, I've started a transcendental meditation practice. And that has been really interesting for my creative process. I started it right before the pandemic, sort of as a way to deal with, anxieties and, health and wellness and all of those things. But what happened is that the calmness that a daily, at twice daily, most days, meditation practice has allowed me to filter through some of the external stuff that I feel like I arrive a little more quickly at the creative work.
Oh, that's beautiful. So you sort of have a habit of dropping beneath the static and noise
Yeah,
of your top consciousness.
right,
Oh, that's
right.
beautiful. So twice a day, you
Yeah,
say.
it's 20 minutes twice a day. So, just it's a mantra based meditation. So, just kind of sitting in silence. And the more you do it, the more you want to do it, I think, because I miss it sometimes, I didn't get it this afternoon. So, but it's for real life too. It's,
Yeah.
you know,
That's really beautiful. And you, of course, have been teaching in all of these different places. You were teaching at Joint Base San Antonio for some time. You are teaching in the MFA program at University of Miami. I know you teach school children, like middle school children. How does teaching affect your writing practice?
it fuels it. Any time that you're preparing something for teaching, you're relearning and reteaching yourself too. So, they say that the best way to learn anything is to teach it. So, and I really love working with the wide ranges of people who I work with. Um, I don't teach kids too often, but once a year, I always do this week long with middle school. And amazingly, you use all the same sorts of ways with middle school and graduate students and everything in between, because it's really just about listening, knowing what you're doing too, like knowing the work that it's a lot of preparation. I tend to prepare quite a bit with what I have because I get immersed in it. And but letting people have their say of what they hear and see in the texts and what they would like to express themselves.
Yeah. I mean, middle school is such a time of like, I mean, your hormones are just like bouncing around in your body. Emotions feel so out of control that poetry can be super helpful. But then there's this, in these other spaces where we have writing workshops and in our spaces and, in the hospitals, there's this sort of commitment to kindness in the group.
Mm-hmm.
Middle schoolers are notoriously mean to one another. How does that, what happens with that? What do you do with that?
Um, I only have those students for a week, so they're pretty, and they've all opted in.
Okay.
It's a special program where they opt in. However, to that question, I've always valued creating safe spaces where everyone understands that there's a kind of level of respect, and I participate as much as I expect anyone else to. So the hierarchy breaks down, and you just are there in a community safe space together. So the middle school students, they feel that. And I mean, people can smell BS a mile away. They just really can. So like if you're BS in it, people know and they don't want to really engage with that. So I feel like if you're really genuine and authentic and excited about what you have to offer, and you've created a safe space for people to engage in that same way, that seems to have been how it works for me anyway.
Yeah.
Like
And
middle school kids will call you out as much as anyone, for sure.
oh yeah, yeah. And their attention is really hard to keep. I think like, but what you learn from people who are like who haven't built up like what they're supposed to be like fully, is like you said, fueling when
Right.
you're returning to that writing. And have you, when you write, and this is like a totally weird question, when you write with middle schoolers, so you write when anybody else writes, and I've noticed that about
Mm-hmm.
your workshops, and I love it so much, because I think it sets a really beautiful tone. Do you try to like get into a middle school mindset?
Maybe my internal age probably doesn't match my chronological age anyway. And I think it's sort of on a sliding scale. I don't know if it goes all the way down to 12, but there's probably moments. I don't know that I would get into a middle school mindset, except that we're all very present with each other, and the humor is fun and funny. But I think we just sort of enjoy, like, I really enjoy people. So we just are in that space, and I enjoy their humor, and it does fuel me in different ways that some you don't get in some other settings. But
And one last question: what are you excited about? It's a broad, wide open question. What are you excited about?
honestly, it's I hope this doesn't sound like a trite answer, but I'm really excited about working with you all and doing more of the workshops, of being more engaged with people who, at the end of spending an hour together, you feel seen and heard and nurtured in a way. And I feel like that's just the very best kind of work to do. So I'm excited about that.
We're so excited to have you. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Seema.